It doesn't matter what you study. It just teaches you that discipline of asking questions always, using evidence-based decision-making in life and career. And that is really powerful, particularly the technological upheaval we're now seeing with the likes of AI and quantum intersecting going forward. I think personal relationships, trust building is so important. Sport is actually a very heavy lifter on social impact in this nation. I think it's beyond a little movement. I think it's a big movement. I think it's a cultural movement. So we're going to better articulate those stories to really appeal to some of the private ancillary funds that are quite big in this nation. Because at the moment, I think, unfortunately, some of the narrative around sport and its power, it's very much towards the economic side. Yeah. But in fact, if we can articulate that actually it's a lever for social change, social impacts, it's more powerful in terms of investment. Are they good people? Like, there's a no decades rule I have. Can I say that?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely can. What if sport isn't really about sport? What if the real power of sport is what it teaches us about belief, identity, leadership, resilience, fairness, community, and the kind of country we want to become? Today on the Mastering Podcast, we sit down with Professor Sarah Kelly, OAM, one of Australia's leading voices in business, government, and the future of sport. Sarah is a professor and executive director at QUT, chair of the Australian Sports Foundation, deputy chair of the Brisbane Lions, and a recognised expert in sports law, sports marketing, sponsorship, governance, technology, and Olympic legacy. But this is not just a conversation about titles. It's a conversation about a life shaped by education, sport, and purpose, about moving from commercial law into academia, from research into boardrooms, from theory into impact. It's about what sport can become when it's well governed, properly funded, and connected to something bigger than winning. Joining me are my two favourite co-hosts, Don Sanker-Small, our in-house education powerhouse, formerly of homegrown Unicorn Go One, and now driving the mission of borderless education with global disruptor Desur Education. He's also an Australian Masters athlete, so he's living the sport meets education thesis in real time. And Will Tuffley, partner at BDO, specialist in helping professional athletes transition beyond sport and protect their financial futures, someone who's spent his life in this arena. Professor Sarah Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Magnus, thank you for that very generous introduction. My goodness. And a pleasure to be here, guys.
That was one of your best.
Mate, there was, I like the powerhouse bit, Don.
I like it too. Thank you. It's intimidating when you're sitting in front of Sarah being called a powerhouse in education. So
you are, though. I mean, the Go One thing was amazing.
Yeah,
I'm in awe of you guys. What you've done, and I know you all. You know, Vu and Chris. And
yeah, we had Vu on the podcast recently,
and just right here in Queensland, you chose Brisbane as the headquarters. I think is
it was an amazing journey.
It's a great impact what you've done there and continue.
So before we talk about titles, and there's a lot in the podcast today in relation to that, and that's very much what you do, but it's not who you are. So can you take us back to your childhood and just tell us what you were like as a kid growing up? Perhaps you could share, if I asked your mum what Sarah was like, what would she say?
Oh, goodness. Firstly, when you said titles, I thought we were going to talk about the back-to-back premierships for the Brisbane Lions. But anyway, that's aside. So, back to childhood. I was really lucky, to be honest. Grew up in a pretty middle-class family here in Brisbane. I think if you're born in Australia, you got two lovely parents who love you, you're ahead of the curve already. So as I've got older, I often sort of am really deeply sort of grateful for that. So, nothing that exciting really, suburban Brisbane, over there at Chapel Hill. What would my mum and dad actually passed away a few years ago now, but, what would mum say? Gosh, she'd I was pretty adventurous, very outdoors, like pretty spirited, I have to say. So I wasn't one of those little girls that stayed inside and played with Barbies. No interest at all. I might have been our neighbourhood was near bushland, so we'd build BMX bike tracks and do all that kind of stuff and run around in sand pits, climbing trees, crazy stuff like that. But Mum used to always dress me in these little dresses she'd make. And I'd come home just with mulberries all over them and ripped because I'd be climbing trees with all the guys. And it was just so much fun. So
that's life, right? That's
very outdoors, very lucky to have that childhood.
Did you think you had a very clear direction of what you wanted to do when you were a child, or was it something that you explored?
Oh, not at all. No. I just had I had a lot of interests, I suppose. Like I always wanted to I always thought space was really interesting. I watched Doctor Who. I was obsessed with Doctor Who. Then I wanted to be a rock singer because I was watching Countdown. This is how old I am. None of you will remember those shows probably.
I do.
But
you should too. We should all remember that, yeah.
And then I loved reading. Mum was actually a school teacher, so she always read to us growing up, and so I loved reading. And then I wanted to be a writer. Then I was going to be an actress. So, yeah, many different things, none of which I turned out to be. But it was always, just always asking a lot of questions. I think even as a kid, people would say, can you just stop asking questions? Like, this has got to stop, But I think that probably was a bit of a sign as to the sort of interest in the law and then research and I guess education as well. It's all about asking questions. So I think that's probably... the signs were there, even though I probably didn't recognise it myself.
Was that curiosity that you followed if you look back at your career, or opportunity?
Both. I think curiosity is probably one of my core values. Absolutely, always has been. I just find it really interesting to learn about stuff, whether it's through reading a book or meeting a new person. I really enjoy, I'm one of those strange people who actually really like meeting new people, travel, all of those sorts of things. So, but I think in terms of career, it's often the opportunity that crosses your way as well. And I'd absolutely acknowledge a bit of luck, meeting the right people, but probably also being fairly open-minded with that curiosity to new opportunities. I think you can see them, hopefully, a lot of the time, whereas maybe people who aren't as curious might miss some of those opportunities. I don't know, but it's a bit of both. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So commercial law, what did that teach you about sort of setting up how the world works and how that set you up, and what sort of base has it given you for what you've sort of achieved throughout?
I thought that was actually, even studying law, I actually really recommend people to get a bit of law under their belts, just along the way. We all need it. But I think what it taught me, and in practice as well in commercial law, was absolutely learning about, I guess, an analytical framework of thinking and that capacity to build a case or an argument and defend it. I think they're really good skills to have in whatever you do in life. So it taught me that. It taught me commerciality. I think everyone needs a bit of that as well. So I think it kind of set me up for that as well, being able to read, understand, critique contracts and go to those clauses where things always go wrong. You kind of learn that as a lawyer, and I'm really happy to have that now. I use it probably most days.
I married a lawyer, so I didn't need to do it. Commercial law.
A lawyer and accountant, that's a pretty good combination.
That's where the conversation usually ends, to be honest.
It's just a power couple.
Yeah, I know. That's it.
No, I think I think it is underrated how just that professional services basis, especially in sport, I think that sometimes, and you would see this a lot, sporting organisations, sometimes we can underestimate how just that base is so important across the board. And I think in education at the moment, potentially where we're finding where education's going, that can sometimes get lost. But I think if you have a look at the great people in sport, they tend to have that early career. It's, the law, the business, the that commercial side, as you said. And I think we really need to ensure that's there.
You're 100% Will, and you're applying it into the sports sector through some of your advisory, I know so well, but it is really important to have those skills coming into a sector like sport, which is actually increasingly complex.
Yeah.
So you need that.
Those basic skills make a difference, right? For you, it seems like the MBA was a bit of a pivot point.
Yeah.
Was there any part in your life that you looked and thought, oh, this is the direction my life is meant to go?
I think doing the MBA, I was actually an in-house general counsel at the time, and they sent me off to do that.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it because it opened up this other sort of opportunity where you could go into management in the organisation or stick to the law and all of these other areas. But yeah, that one really opened up the opportunity in marketing and undertaking a PhD. I came across a fantastic professor out of the States, Professor Bettina Cornwell, who's now the Phil Knight Chair over in Oregon University and still very involved in sport. So she really encouraged me to do a PhD, which is probably the last thing. Because I was thinking, opportunity cost of a PhD, as you know, it's huge. I thought, oh no, I don't need to do that. I'm starting to have kids. We just had twins at the time, and I was juggling all of that. And then she sort of just, for about 6 months to a year, she said, no, come and do a lecture for me, come and do some tutoring, and just gradually whittled me down into and convinced me to go and do that. So that was a turning point, because once I started that and learning research skills, relearning stats. I'd done a commerce degree as an undergrad, but never, and we did stats in that. I don't know if you've done business and commerce, and you do stats, but I think not having the context of how all that stuff can actually be applied and used. I did that during the PhD, and I thought, I really understand this. It's just so, it was actually really, it sounds nerdy, but really exciting learning about those sorts of research skills and why they're important for life as much as business and academic research.
I think that
was a good turning point.
All the information that is out there right now, I think everyone should have the capability to dissect research and be able to make up for their own mind, like if this is real news or not. I think that's a huge requirement for that type of skill, along with everything else we spoke about. So having that understanding to be able to look at a piece of news or something that's been presented to you and
in a
really
critical
look back.
kind of way.
Correct. Yeah, I think everyone should get some sort of education around that on how to do it. And for me, that's a huge important piece.
One thing I'm curious about is that how you can be really capable at something but not necessarily be fulfilled by it. Like, did you go through a stage in your life where you had to sort of distinguish that between what you're really capable of and what you were called to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a tricky one in different phases of your life, because when you're younger, you've often not got a choice, right?
Correct.
You're told to get a task done at work or whatever it may, and you got to do it. And you got to do it well. And I think that's something, well, Dad certainly taught us. He was a publican. And so we grew up in pubs, serving the public. He sent us off to Macca's to work at Macca's for 5 years at one point, because
the great starting point.
Systems and operations.
Start somewhere.
Did any of you work there?
No.
I managed 6 months there.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
And then you couldn't do it any longer?
Well, then I left school and started an apprenticeship. So.
Oh, well, that's, you were on the way.
McDonald's used to have some of the best leadership programs and management training programs. They were well
systems and process.
Yeah, that's it.
That's why Dad sent us there. He was an accountant, by the way.
Smart, mate.
Yeah, straight after uni, I used to manage a Dick Smith's electronics store. They don't exist anymore, but every time someone came from McDonald's, we always hired them because we knew that they've gone through this rigorous training and the processes, and they were well trained. So I know exactly what your dad was thinking.
Yeah, and you're serving the public.
Yeah.
You're serving everyone from the public and learning to kind of smile, serve the 7 steps of service or whatever they taught you.
Isn't that another hidden talent, I think, to be able to in this day and age, that is just retail. It's serving in one way, description one way or the other.
And I think that's exactly right. And that's something we learned at such a young age in the pubs and in McDonald's. And to your earlier question, that makes me always approach something I'm asked to do by someone with that service sort of mentality. It's like
commercial mindset.
I may not like doing it. I may not be good at doing it, but I'm going to give it a good crack. And because I respect that person or that organizer, and I'll give it a go. But then I think later in your career, you're in that position where you can actually really, I guess, discern whether this will actually draw on your strengths, that you can actually add value. I always ask myself that question around saying yes or no to something, and actually enjoy what you're doing. That becomes more and more important because time is so scarce.
I think as you get older, I know I went through a particular point in your career where all of a sudden you were kind of forced a little bit that, no, I have to do this and I have to work for such and such a person. You have to tolerate that. And then you get to a little bit of more of a point, I think, where you're able to choose on what you like to do rather than what you have to do. Do you think, when I look at your profile and all of your achievements, I don't think a lot of people really fully understand the pressures of what you do, and what's that cost you? All that pressure and all of those titles, what's that demanded of you over the years?
I've really enjoyed everything, I'd have to say, and that the failures as much as the wins along the way, it's mostly because I've just got to meet incredible people, travel to unbelievable places and learn pretty much every day. So I sort of look back at a lot of stuff that I've somehow ended up doing, and through whatever reason and whatever people have steered me in that direction. And it's just, I don't regret any of it. So that's something I'm quite happy with all of that. But in terms of what it's cost, I guess it does cost energy. I think anything you say yes to, any project you take on, it's energy. So I think I've learned, I wasn't perfect at it when I was younger, especially when I had young kids. I think there's your energy levels are really hard to kind of get right between work and raising a family and seeing your friends and all those, staying fit and all those things. But it's something I've really kind of thought about over the last, I would say, 15 years, where I think you have to retain your energy to give energy to others. And so that's something I really work on.
I think this is something that Magnus really covers really well in his own M26 podcast, which is the mind, body, spirit thing, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do that makes it easier? Are there any practices?
Daily habits.
What are the daily habits?
To preserve and build energy.
Yeah.
I think the great thing about academia is it's quite flexible. So, and they do encourage us to apply our expertise out there in practice, which I absolutely enjoy through the board roles, for example, and consulting and all of that kind of thing. So, but the energy sort of stuff that I probably do every day, exercise every morning. It's not a good day if I haven't got in my exercise in the morning.
Yeah.
I sit. What do you do exercise wise?
Oh, I do. Can't you tell? Just I'm so fit. But I just think it's really important, particularly as you get older too, to preserve your bone strength and your spirit too. To your great point, Magnus, it's your mind as well, your cognitive ability as well as the physical energy you bring. I do gym. I swim a lot. I love ocean swimming. I love surfing. I love stand-up paddleboarding, walking the dog every day. What else? A bit of running, although I broke my ankle in 3 places last year. So the running is probably not quite right yet, but getting there on that. Bit of yoga and Pilates as well.
You've got everything covered. That's unusual.
It's impressive.
My philosophy is that you got to do the strength training, you got to do the cardio training, and then you got to do the agility, and you've got all of those covered. Because a lot of people, I've got a lot of friends who, for example, master cyclist, and just when you just humped over a bike, that's great for your cardiovascular fitness and for your legs, but it's not really beneficial across the board. So
for the whole thing,
100%. So well done.
But I do enjoy that. But to the energy point, something I've been doing the last few years is getting up first thing, not looking at the phone. I've banned myself from doing that because all the news is so depressing. It comes in overnight. I just don't want to see it. So I get up and make myself a green tea and sit and sip that, because I learned about gut health recently and that's really important. So I thought I'll give that a crack. I feel good, so I thought I'll keep going with that. And read. I usually read a novel or a book for about 45 minutes before I then go and exercise. So that's something I do enjoy.
What are you reading now?
Well, actually, I've just finished one and started a new one. So I've just finished. You guys would love it if you haven't read it. The Sarah Wynne Williams whistleblowing story about Facebook. She was one of the original executives and head of global policy. It's a phenomenal story. So that one was really good and actually extraordinary. And then there was one I just started reading as an Irish writer, John Boyne, The Heart's Invisible Furies. It's really good too.
You've lived inside universities and business schools and in executive education. What do you think changes a person with education? What is that fundamental change that happens with people with formal education or any type of education, to be honest?
I think one would be confidence. That's the thing I just love seeing in students. You get a lot of students who are actually first in family to attend university sometimes, and they're the ones where, we get this real privilege, I think. You sit on the stage at graduation when they come across the stage and you get to know most of them. But some of them, when they cross the stage, I still get, even though it's been years, you'd still get quite emotional because you know their whole story and they might be from a remote regional place in Queensland or Australia. They might be the first in family to go through university, and you've got to meet their parents before the ceremony, and they're sitting, you can see them and they're all crying. They've never been to something, all this pomp and ceremony that we have at graduation is really quite special. And I think it's confidence is a massive thing. Another one would be the capacity to think critically, like we were just talking about, is just a really important skill that you have forever. It doesn't matter what you study. It just teaches you that discipline of asking questions always, using evidence-based decision-making in life and career, learning to work with diverse groups of people and in teams like that. You learn that at university because they are diverse by definition. They're a microcosm of the world. Another thing that keeps me in those institutions, you just meet so many people of all ages who are just interesting people, who are bright people, who are committed people to, to that sort of, to educating themselves in a lifelong way.
I think it plays I think there's a huge problem in society right now. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yeah.
I think education plays a huge part in that. One thing I want to ask is that there's been a huge push against institutional education versus work experience. What do you think that education alone gives you versus life experience? Right? I wish I could build this table rather than being able to write a thesis.
Oh, me too.
Especially at the moment.
More than
that's Magnus actually built this table himself.
Did you really?
It's built
it's a really
by
nice table.
So yeah.
I really love
it.
What's
I wish
timbers that? That's really
But yeah, what do you think that education gives that life experience sometimes can't?
Yeah, look, it is a really good question. And it's one that we're certainly asking in university land at the moment as well. And I think that they're probably not mutually exclusive. That I think what we're seeing now is the model of the full-time student, sadly, I think, because we had such a good time at undergrad uni, is probably gone. And a lot of the students, what we're now seeing, there's cost pressures as well, obviously, or cost of living pressures, where they're needing to work alongside undertaking a degree. So I think that's just one important point. They're not mutually exclusive. But in terms of if you were to go full-time and only do the degree before heading out to work or internships, it would be that it creates a time and space and probably a safe place to have sandpit, robust discussions, debates, confidence building, learning to ask the right questions of the right people at the right time, some useful frameworks and tools that you take for life into your career. And you learn probably how to teach as well as learn. And I think all of those things, you learn how to learn is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's a really, I think that's a great life skill to have, forever on that front. And I think social capital is increasingly becoming, it was always important and a great outcome of undertaking university, particularly as an undergrad and postgrad. But now you set up these social trusted networks for life, and that is really powerful, particularly the technological upheaval we're now seeing with the likes of AI and quantum intersecting going forward. I think personal relationships, trust building is so important, and you can gain that through that dedicated time learning how to learn.
I'm going to put you on the spot. So if you were to convince Magnus to go to university and do formal education, what would your pitch be to him?
Oh, Magnus
why would he need
terrific. No, because you've got.
And why would he need it?
So as a mature age student, he's not that old, but we're pitching the mature age.
The people that sit down the front and ask all the questions. That's one of those ones. Yeah.
I think if you've never done it, give it a crack, because you will learn something, and you'll either learn that you enjoy it or you don't, and that's okay either way. But you're going to meet some new people who aren't in your usual orbit, which will be interesting in itself.
Yep.
You will meet some really interesting, smart people who'll be teaching you. And I think, teaching these days is a very co-created activity. So I think it's something you'd enjoy. Bringing your tremendous life experience to the classes and to the experience as well will also reward you as much as others. So peer-to-peer learning is a big part of how it's set up in a university environment. So I would say give it a good crack. And I think to everyone, it doesn't matter if you've been to uni or you haven't, at some point you need to be upgrading and upskilling constantly now. That's the new world we live in. So for Magnus, it might be something like, studying something of interest or something that will set up a side hustle more effectively for you, perhaps. Have you studied accounting?
My wife's an accountant, so I'm
you don't need the accounting there.
So I like that, and we actually had this discussion when we interviewed the founder of the company that Don works for, Desir, and the topic we raised was the apprenticeship model. And I think what you were saying earlier was not as many people are going down the full-time uni road. So then you're actually doing some study, but you're learning on the job at the same time. And I mean, the closest thing to a formal education I've got is I did the Australian Institute of Company Directors course.
That's great.
Oh, that's
great.
So that was and it was interesting just because I think the way that I do learn is very practical. And I recently, a few years ago, got my helicopter license, and just the theory element of that, because I do love education, but I love the kind of the practical element of being able to apply it straight away to daily life. So it'd be interesting to have a look at.
I think you're playing yourself down so many times. Every time you say that you haven't had a formal education, man, you've done AICD, you've done a pilot's license. That's true, and you've written a book.
That's impressive.
So I think we're going to take that piece out of your profile. Formal education doesn't exist anymore.
And it doesn't have, I'm a fan of informal education as much as formal education. So it doesn't have to be for a degree.
As you said, growth mindset is the key, right? As long as we're continuing to learn and we're not static.
Yeah, one thing I like about formal education is I always like to be in a room with people that are smarter than me, like right now what I'm doing here. And when I did my MBA, it gave me the opportunity to do that all the time. It's getting you're going through that journey with people that are either smarter than you or at least at the level of you're at. So
I also think it's also teaching you that you're always going to have different opinions to other people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But how to articulate that in a way that everyone still moves in the right direction.
Yeah,
I think that's probably what the issue with politics at the moment is they're not sort of on the same trajectory as each other. It's sort of this friction of fighting against each other. There's nothing wrong with having a different opinion on how we get somewhere, as long as we sort of all in general agree, well, let's just keep moving forward. Yeah. And I think that's what university taught me, is that you're always, you might be in a group together and you're like, well, I don't agree with that person's opinion, but I understand where they're coming from and respect it. Right. How can we utilize that to move forward? I think that's the important thing that you're getting across.
And I think that's the reason why they attack education first, right? The ability for people to be able to separate disinformation and misinformation from the truth. Agreed. That I think comes a lot from education. Like if you're educated enough to understand the truth, then you're that far ahead. And that's why when you find some of these regimes, the first thing they attack is education, and I think there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And going back to that idea of having a safe place to have a robust debate, and when we say robust, it is those bringing those differing perspectives and being challenged, and not having the algorithms involved in that, people involved in that,
people,
and that. sort of, I think if there was more of that, and maybe universities can serve that purpose a little bit, which is we've set up the QT Leadership Institute, which I've moved out of business school space to that, partly for that reason. And it's to set up a safe place for people to come in and have those robust debates and learn about themselves and others through that.
Tell us a bit about that. What's the Leadership Institute and what does it do?
Well, it's like I need your help. It's a startup in a bureaucracy. How hard can it be? But I said yes. I said yes, and I'm not regretting it. It's a lot of fun, really meeting some really interesting people globally who are going to be part of the Institute as our Institute Fellows. We've got academic experts coming in, but we're flipping the model where we're teaching leadership by bringing the wisdom, the outside wisdom in, people with lived experience.
Yeah.
So it's quite exciting.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds exciting.
What are 3 learning habits do you think people, if you were talking to a young person, and you mentioned before, and that's what I've heard with university, that what you learn is you learn how to learn, but what would be 3 learning habits that you think you'd recommend that a young person should have?
It's probably commitment. It's like any kind of job. You know, you got to commit to it. You got to have some work ethic around it. So I think that would be number 1, setting aside the time, getting into a habit of reading what you're meant to read. Otherwise, it's a wasted opportunity. There's no point in doing it. It's also probably important to, I think collaborative learning is very much a part of the process. It's not just yourself and what you think. It's actually
a great playing team sport, I think.
It is a team sport. Learning is a team sport. Absolutely. Like we're talking about the peer-to-peer learning, collaborative learning is part of that as well. So I think it's committing to that, because I think humans do that really well. And I think in learning environments now, whether it's in a vocational, a trade, it's through an apprenticeship, or it's through a degree, where we're needing to double down on that collaborative learning, because that's what humans, that's how you scale, that's how you actually impact the most.
All the workshops I've attended, that's what I really enjoy about those. Like what you get from the facilitator and what you get from the people sitting around the room, you get probably more out of those at the end of the day than what you do out of the facilitator, just understanding how other people do things. I'm curious with you though, Will, you do a lot of work with kids and with education. What are your thoughts around that as far as the skills that you think are lacking a little bit potentially in some young?
I mean, I'm probably putting it on from like an accounting lens or professional services lens. I think we underestimate, and I sort of spoke about before, I think we underestimate sometimes the base. So for me, going and doing 10 years in professional service, I just think sets up everyone so well, whether that's, you know, whether you then go into politics, whether you then go into education, whether you then go into sport. You know, I look at a lot of the really good people in sport, the CEOs of the world. A lot of them have a really good, you know, professional services basis. Yeah. So to me, I think that's one that's really important. And I think, and this is something that we sometimes struggle with our junior accountants, actually just going through that 10-year process, the learnings out of that is just as important. So because everything, and I've said this a lot on the podcast, because everyone is in a rush to get to their pinnacle place, they sort of go, oh yeah, but if I've got the capability to do it, then I'm fine. But it's the learnings that you have during that 10-year period that actually set you up just as much. So the interactions, the stuff ups, the people that come at you, you know, how to deal with different personalities. That bit is the bit that actually is really important.
It's interesting. I'm looking at that in the context of construction and also in the context of fitness, and that's foundation. Right, so you got to build that foundation. Like you build a fitness foundation, and you're a fit athlete, whether you can go off and play whatever sport. But if you're not prepared to do that hard work and get fit, and if you're not prepared to put down foundations on your house,
that was the best piece of advice I ever got, was just go and work your bum off for 10 years, and then
the problem is, do we have the 10 years anymore? Like is it the you know things are moving. I think one of the EY papers came out and said like it's changing. 3 years is as long as that skill's relevant for, and it's dropping even more and more. So,
but I think that reiterates why the learnings that happen, it's actually nothing to do with what you're actually learning. It's actually the war stories that happen in that 10-year period around like
you got to do your
clients that come at you, or people that you know come and leave, and the interactions that form that 10 years is almost more important than the actual what your capabilities are through that period.
So on that, Sarah, to you, what does future of education look like? What does future of work look like? How do you think Are we still going to be in lecture theatres? Are there going to be undergraduate degrees in the future? What's your opinion on the future of education?
It's such an interesting space right now, isn't it? Well, everywhere. What does the future look like? I mean, none of us really know. Certainly, I'm reading and listening, and as you guys would be as well. I do think there's still a really important role to play for a structured sort of environment for an undergrad student. I mean, what are they, 17 when they leave school here in Queensland, 18? They've got no idea what they want to do, most of them. But they need a kind of place to learn a bit more about themselves, work a casual job maybe or an internship along the way as well. But I think if we're through the learning environment, however that looks, and yes, there'll be a bit of hybrid, a bit of, I'm a powerful believer in face-to-face. I think we've got to really enhance that rather than diminish that, because young people, especially from what the reports are sort of showing and research is showing, they're losing the capacity to have an honest conversation, a difficult conversation, to negotiate, to interview successfully. And now they're doing, I've had 4 kids go through the system, but, and Will, you would know too, but the AI interviews, most of them do for the first cut. An AI interview. Can you believe that? So these young people, they're so excited. They've done a degree and they get an AI interview, and there's maybe 10,000 kids doing that as well for the first cut.
And that's after usually you go through the ATSs that are screening everything.
So you need to be you need to be confident and able to communicate. So those communication skills are very human, and they're only practiced human to human, in my view. And I think in universities we can really set that up in degrees. Yeah. The content is becoming a commodity, I'd have to say, a lot of the time, but the actual applied nature of the content and the problem solving and the overlay of wicked systems like problems that occur in every kind of field, that's the stuff we can do, and we can do it a resolution or some sort of challenge around those. Entrepreneurial mindset would be another as well, because these kids are going to have to, as we know, it's not just one career anymore. They've just sort of got to have their little case of skills and tools, and they pack it up at the end of a project rather than a job and move to the next project. That's what I think the future will be. It probably won't be employers or organisations even. It'll be people selling their skills and their experience for a project.
That's interesting.
Where do you see the power of relationships? That's been a huge one for me, and just from getting into doing this or doing that, just knowing somebody. And I'd imagine through university, you'd be able to develop a lot of relationships, and through that, potentially that could be leading to a job or to an internship. And is getting education around how to be able to, like you pointed out, to communicate and actually build relationship. Where do you think that sits?
And network. I actually think you got to have a networking game these days, these young people. And often you'll take some along, and you would too, Will, along to events and things, and, really try and coach them, because I think some don't learn those skills along the way, and it is really important. It's often who you know.
Something with the problem is
getting that cut through.
The way of networking that they're familiar with is just sliding into someone's DM. I don't even know what that means, but that is what it is. Like, I've been told that, even posting on social media platforms is not cool anymore. It's more direct messaging. So there's a whole different way of communication. There's a whole different way of interaction, whole different way of holding relationships and networking. And when you put them into a very professional environment, like
put them in a room face to face.
Yeah, and it's still.
But it's a great point, Sarah, because I think that's a really important skill that it doesn't matter what job you do, you need to have that skill. So one of the things we talk about with the athletes is like their network is so epic in that during their career, and it drops off real quick as soon as that sporting career is over. So what skills can you enhance while you've got that network really close to you? And it might be just really simple stuff. It might be just taking, and business cards are sort of going out the window, but it might be like, I'm just going to come away from this networking event with my sporting team. I'm just going to come away with 2 contacts. That contact might end up being your boss and give you that job post-career for the rest of your life. There's heaps of rabbit holes you go through with networking and stuff as well. But I think getting involved in it and learning how it works for you is really, really important, because again, no matter, I mean, this is almost a form of networking. Like, you'd go to so many events where the networking situation is different in each situation. So it's a never ever thing that you're never going to have to get away from. So you need to keep building those skills and have that growth mindset, as you said.
I just want to add something to that, because a lot of these networking events, it's very, what do you do, title driven. And what I've learned is any sustainable relationships that I have are values based.
Yeah.
So when you're just meeting that person, that you're connecting on that level and not just connecting, oh, this person's coming along, I noticed them on the invite, I've got to go talk to them because they may be able to do this. That is quite transactional. It's quite shallow. It's not going to lead anywhere. And I think from a younger person's perspective of really getting to know themselves and what their own values are, and then surround yourself with people that have got those same shared values. Because I think just even that word values is something that's a little bit missing in society.
And that it's a really good point, Magnus. I really like what you just said, because if you don't have a values alignment with whatever relationship you're building in terms of trust, it's nothing. Like, it's just not worthwhile. And I think the sooner you realise that, the better.
Yeah.
So, I do think that's interesting. And for young people, I think there's a lot of value. I've certainly had the benefit of it in reverse mentoring, where some of these young people, and they don't, they haven't got runs on the board yet and all of that, but gee, they're bright, and so many are so impressive, and many have side hustles now and that entrepreneurial mindset. They're getting ready. They're ahead of any of us on the AI curve, the quantum curve. There's some great, I mentor some of the startups around the place, and phenomenal what they're doing out of, an apartment, what you can do, or, just on as a side hustle, and they're doing really well. Yeah. So I think they should have confidence around mentoring potentially more senior leaders. I think there's a real role for them to play there, and particularly their voices, like having confidence that their voice needs to be heard at any table. And so going into any networking and all the rest with that confidence is a good thing.
That's a great point. Yeah. I never looked at it that way. That's a really good point. We've got one of our co-founders of the Mastering podcast is this 25-year-old gun who's got so many side hustles that we can't even count. And they all probably make more money than what we make in a year, each one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
So just to add to that, though, because we've all had side hustles, and what I will say to a lot of those younger generation, they get very energized and they get something to 80%. But they don't follow through. They don't have the commitment, the determination to run, and then something else, and we've all been that.
The big shiny things.
Yep. You get easily distracted, you go off and you go off for something else. So that ability just to stay and get the thing 100% completed is a good skill to have.
With that values alignment, I think that's a really good segue to move from sort of the education to sport now, and all the roles that you have with sport. Sport is an area where there's a lot of passion. People are passionate about their teams. When you're no. When you're as part of someone who's on a board and governing that with all those people that would be still passionate about, say, the team or the organisation, how does that, I suppose, that values alignment even within the board, how do you guys continue to run in the direction of having that? Yes, the passion, but how do you run the organisation well within sport, and how do you get that right, that balance between passion and running a sporting organisation?
Hit on it, Will. Yeah. It's like any other business, really, except that all the stakeholders, and there's a lot of them in sport, actually, in the ecosystem of sport, they're all highly passionate and engaged and emotional. So you're dealing with that as an extra layer of risk, stress, time, like all these things, strategy even. And then on the board itself, you can get a little bit of that. I don't think sometimes you can be on a board in sport and not appreciate the sport. And when I say that, you don't have to be a raving lunatic fan, which I probably am a lot of the time with a lot of the sports I'm involved in, but you don't have to be. You've got to have a good commercial sense and the right skills for the matrix of the board. But I think sometimes you can sometimes it has to be a bit of a juggle around getting it off the agenda, the emotion, and making sure you're sticking to, well, what strategic decisions do we need to be making? What risk? What are the people issues we need to look at here? But I must say, on something like the Brisbane Lions board, when we have Chris Fagan and Danny Daly come in to present on the football bit, everyone's leaning in a bit more, and but I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, 'cause I think it is a hard balance, because I think it's a business, but then it's also sport. So it's sort of you want to make sure that it's I mean, you need passion in it. Like, I think that's an important part of it, but I think it is a commercial business in the end, and we have to get the right people to run those businesses. But at the same time, it's sport, and sport should be fun. So we need to get that balance right as well.
It's the most complicated part, though. So whether you're on a board or whether it's a business, it's dealing with the personalities. It's dealing with that emotion. That's what's most challenging. When you break it down onto the other parts, they're actually easier to have direction on. But dealing with those. And we all know that to make a good board is all about diversity. So you've got different people with different views, and can be about fun.
If you're not having robust debate on a board, even in a sports board, it's not a successful board.
No, absolutely.
Well said.
So in that sense, what separates a good board versus a dysfunctional one?
Oh, gee, there's a lot of elements in there. I mean, I think you've got to have a good chair. I think the chair has a huge influence. The chair-CEO relationship is critical as well. I think diversity is important, and I've seen that in action. Whether, I've been on boards where I'm the only woman, for instance. I've been on boards where there's a gender balance, and you might have an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person on the board as well, as a multicultural person that's truly representative of our society. Those sort of boards, to me, have worked a lot better, just from that diversity of opinion and background. So I'm a huge fan of the diversity of the skills matrix, but also backgrounds. And increasingly, I'd say age really matters. So going back to my earlier point, I think we've got to get more young people, more Gen Zs on boards. I actually think get them through the AICD, get them those quals quicker, because a lot of decision makers in this country, whether it's in sport or business, are just not, they don't have the skills or experience around the new technologies that absolutely inform every sector right now.
You're saying we should have more young people
who are digital natives who get it. They need to be on board.
I also don't think it's a technology thing. I think it's just how you came through. Yeah, it's a perspective from, especially in sport. I've been on sort of boards since even just my local cricket team. I was a treasurer at 21 or 22, just even being on a simple board like that, the learning outcomes that you get from something like that are huge. And I always find that I'm the youngest person on board, and I'm 40 this year, and we should have a lot of people within, their late 20s, early 30s on boards as part of it's another string to growing as a person. I think it's really
the board selection criteria is antiquated because
I just think that I think a lot of young people, it's the last thing they're thinking about is, well, I'm going to go on especially in sport, I'm going to go on a non-for-profit board where I'm not going to get paid. Why would I do that? But I almost look at it as free education. Yeah, for me,
it absolutely is, and I think a lot of young people might have a bit of an imposter syndrome, thinking that I'm only 25, I'm only 30, what can I offer? But when I look at what some of these guys, late 20s, have achieved, and their viewpoint, they're just looking at things. That's one of the reasons we've got Ryan on as part of the podcast, because we're diverse. We're literally taking up one decade as far as our ages are concerned. So we've got a different lens that we're looking at things from, and that's beneficial.
Yeah. And when you think about Gen Zs and the alphas, now they're calling them the beaters, the really young ones. the Gen Zs, if we look at them, they're a third of our population now. The third of our voters, third of the workforce, third of our fans, most athletes in sport are young people of that generation. So why shouldn't they be represented on the boards and the governance of our sports?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm going to change it a little bit. Betting, sponsorship tension, and athlete welfare. What does trust in sport now actually depend on?
Yeah, look, sport that's its main asset, I would say. The universal cultural connector. We all agree sport is, the visibility of it is really important culturally to everyone in the world, actually. Doesn't matter what language you speak. It relies on trust as a brand, sport. So once you've lost that trust through something like an integrity breach, it's really hard to repair that trust. And we've seen it in so many, high-profile cases like the Lance Armstrong one or the Essendon case, the Cronulla Sharks. It front page all the time around integrity issues in sport. So it's really Sandpaper-gate, dare I mention, as well.
Yeah.
But it's
no, you didn't. But that was
So I think that's sort of at the crux of it. The integrity, and I'd also say ethics as well, because that sort of preempts whether there's an integrity breach or not. You have to have some oversight in the environment around. The right systems, processes, people and culture around just doing the right thing. Yeah. It sounds simple. It's absolutely not in practice. And I think that's a really interesting space that sport can always improve on. And we learnt that out of the review into things like child abuse in this nation a few years ago, where the churches were sort of 2/3 of that report, but 1/3 of that report was Australian sport.
Sports, yeah.
And so that was really concerning. And, things like child safeguarding, poor governance in sport, those issues are continuing. So there's still a lot of room for improvement around ethics and integrity. But we've got to also look at things like, I would say, inclusion in sport and accessibility to sport for the whole nation, whether you're in a regional area, whether you're, from a low economic background, whether you... whether you're whatever gender you are, whatever multicultural background you have, you should be able to access physical activity and sport in your local area. And that's something I think we can do some more work on.
What do you think we're missing from a leadership perspective, and what do you think the main skill set is around leadership?
In sport, I would say it's being open-minded, and with that capacity to listen and bring in and distill diverse perspectives by asking the right questions and not being shy to do that. I think, unfortunately, in sport in our nation and probably many nations, is the sector is too insular. It's just the same old people. And there's great people in the sector. Don't get me wrong. We've got 300,000 volunteers in this nation. It's amazing.
That was literally a little bit of my point. My wife's involved in the finance manager for both Queensland Little Athletics and also
really?
Swimming Queensland. And
good on her.
It's so when you're dealing in that,
it's hard.
It's hard, very hard. So they're all volunteers, but that's sort of what I look at it from a distance. It's almost like it lacks a leadership because nobody's really in charge and everybody's running around. They're doing their best, but they don't have the leadership training behind.
What do you think is the most common mistake that people make when they move into those leadership positions? Because we see some amazing athletes that are coming into, I'm not going to name any sports, but it happens. But
it often happens. Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out. So what do you think the common mistakes are these leaders are making in sports?
I think it's definitely the listening and going back to the curiosity piece earlier and learning, looking outside your sector for the benchmarks that really should be expected of your sector. So whether that's around ethics and integrity, systems, processes, your attention to cybersecurity or the latest technology coming in for high performance, or ensuring that you're not just talking about inclusion in sport and the access for all. You're actually walking that talk through the numbers. That it's paying attention to the details around the data and what that's telling you. Most importantly, I would say stakeholder engagement, like really listening to everyone out there in the best way you can, but getting out there, walking around whatever the club, whatever the sport is, whether it's community sport or it's professional sport, Olympics and Paralympic sports, understanding as a leader what is going on everywhere in that ecosystem in which it operates, listening to the athlete who's on the pathway to become a professional or elite athlete, listening to all the staff at all levels, listening to those volunteers and watching, observing, I think is absolutely critical, and there's not enough of that.
Do you think we have too many athletes that are coming into administrative positions? Or because there's always that argument, right? There are professional administrators that might be very good at what they do, but we seem to be putting more and more athletes into these administrative positions, and we wonder why they fail. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a huge fan of employing athletes and former athletes, but I do think they've got to have the right support mechanisms, the right skills as well. So you wouldn't want to set up an athlete for failure by putting them into the marketing team when they've got no understanding of how marketing works and some study perhaps.
Just need training. Like
commercial.
Do you think those pathways are there? Both. This is a question for both of you. You are both involved in this piece. Do you think those pathways are there? Are we properly training these athletes to be prepared for the transition?
I think there is. I think it comes back to the purpose, right? So I think there's potentially a lot of people that have never been in sport that are in sport that they might necessarily be the right role for them as well. Like if you've just run a business and don't know anything about the sport, potentially your role in the sport's not great either. So it's not just the athlete side. I think it's the commercial side as well that we've got to get the balance right. I think when it comes down to it's how the athlete shouldn't go into a sporting administration role because they've got nothing else. That's the wrong reason to get into sport. Yeah. The reason to get into sport is because you're passionate about it, but you also bring some ability and some knowledge base that can actually move the organisation forward. You're adding value. Yeah. As soon as it's about, I just don't have anything else in my kit bag, so therefore I'm just going to fall back in sport, that's where there's issues. I think that's what we need to, and it's the same with commercial people coming into sport. If they're just coming into it because they're passionate about it and they just want to see the Lions win or the Broncos win, that's the wrong reason to be getting involved in that sport.
You think that's the wrong reason?
I do. Okay. I think you need that can be part of it. I think it's important. Like you can be passionate about it, but you need to make sure that it's still, I want the organisation to move forward for the right reasons, not just to win a premiership. Like yes, premierships are great and that's awesome, but there's plenty of really good sporting organisations that haven't won a premiership. But does that mean they're a bad organisation? I would argue not. So I think it's trying to get
longevity as well, because if you're too fixated on one premiership, but you're not building the roots to be able to get that in,
it's a long term. I think that's the key thing. If you look at the best sporting organisations in Australia, they've got really, really long term. Like the Lions, when Fags came, they didn't win the premiership the next year, did they? Like it's been a big journey. Like Geelong, always there because they've got a long-term thing.
Always the long game.
Melbourne Storm, it's a long-term vision. It's not like they do something that is going to, flick a switch tomorrow. Yeah. So I think that's what's important when they look at it.
What are your thoughts, Sarah?
I do think, so I lead the Minerva Network here in Queensland, which Will is familiar with, and, it's female business leaders mentoring pro bono female elite athletes nationally. We've got 1,000 athletes. It's a fabulous thing. And as part of that, we're trying to mentor them into the workforce post-career, and we're setting them up while they're elite athletes to do that. And I think that's a great example of providing the right support mechanisms around them, encouraging them to study, encourage them to set up their own business or do an apprenticeship. And relying on our networks, drawing on the networks again to tap them to employ these amazing athletes. So I think that's one part of it, that articulating the incredible translated skills athletes and elite sport brings to any workplace. It's a no-brainer. And I know I'm preaching to the converted in you guys, but seriously, like they understand leadership, they understand teamwork, they understand work ethic, commitment, and most of all, they understand resilience. And unfortunately, that's something that is probably lacking in a lot of people. They haven't had adversity to truly test them and test themselves. So I think they bring a lot. But on the flip side, I think athletes also probably need the humility dose. Many of them have that. Some may not. Coming out of professional sport, perhaps sometimes, where they have to start at the bottom and be willing to do that and actually be open to learning. And whether that's in the classroom doing a degree, and I think the university environment is really supporting them through athlete scholarships, more flexible learning, flexible pathways and all the rest. I think that's a really good thing because they do need a bit of support in juggling the whole thing. But I do think athletes also need to have the right mindset as well to commit to what they need to commit to, which is a whole new learning. It's nothing to do with sport really. It's a commercial environment, and it's high risk. It involves governance. It involves people and stakeholder engagement, which may not be their preferred skills to apply. To Will's earlier point, maybe it's not right, but it's having that self-assessment, the diagnostics around whether it is they're amenable to the sports sector.
So the right intention always matters. I think that's what both of you are trying to say, right? I think talking about support networks, we have to talk about the Australian Sports Foundation. Amazing. We've never heard of it until we had one of our, I think it was our first episode where Cedric Dubler came and
isn't he a lovely fellow? Amazing. I really like him.
For listeners who's heard the name but don't know what it does, can you tell us in a few words who the Australian Sports Foundation is and why does it matter for sports people?
Well, it's actually been around for 40 years. So it's been, it was established back in the day to fundraise money for Australian sport, mostly community sport and athletes. And really a lot of that hasn't changed. So we are still the biggest fundraising vehicle that is tax deductible for Australian sport. And that includes athletes through to community sport, right through to the professional sports, big foundations and things. So, last year, for instance, we had a record-breaking year of fundraising, which was $118 million for Australian sport. But of course, with the home games coming this way, we're looking at doubling that by 2030, and more importantly, making sure we set up a culture of giving nationally that benefits sport forever as a legacy. It's needed more than ever, actually.
So do you cover off on every sport, like all the team sports, athletics, swimming? Is there a gap?
In the Australian Sports Foundation? Yes. Yeah. So we're sort of the enabling platform that enables anyone, an athlete, a sport, a team, to fundraise for sport. And then another thing that a lot of people don't know that we're actually we see as a major growth opportunity here for the nation for sport is the ability to articulate the social impacts of sport. So programs through sport, which might be education programs through sport. It could be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander pathways through sport, gender equality facilities, respect through sport. A lot of these programs, sport is actually a very heavy lifter on social impact in this nation. So we're going to better articulate those stories to really appeal to some of the private ancillary funds that are quite big in this nation. Because at the moment, I think, unfortunately, some of the narrative around sport and its power, it's very much towards the economic side. Yeah. But in fact, if we can articulate that actually it's a lever for social change, social impacts, it's more powerful in terms of investment.
So you're the framework for, like, you're on the board for Aussie Athletes Fund.
Yep.
And we got Wattle. So there's a lot of really good platforms now for athletes to get support from. So you're the framework that allows those platforms to raise the fund.
There's sporting organisations that have set up as their own DGR, but the Sports Foundation is the perfect avenue if that can't fit, because there's obviously certain legislation you have to fit under to be able to be part of that. So the Sports Foundation enables us to tax deductibility for all those organisations. So
it's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's
everything from a junior athletes who's just starting up. A lot of people don't know. Like even to represent the country, you still have to fund.
You have to fundraise.
I played golf with a para golfer the other day who's gone to the World Championships in Scotland, and he's like, "Oh, I've got my ASF page. Here you go." And it's like, "Oh, how good!" Like just
it's really
playing golf with him, I can just give him $50, $100.
He's representing Australia.
Yeah.
And how much does it cost him out of pocket to do that.
Probably. I don't know how much he was. I think he was trying to raise $5,000, for example. But like the Sports Foundation gives him still costs him out of pocket money, but it gives him an opportunity on a platform to be able to raise the money tax deductively. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, as a masters athlete, I'm quite aware of the importance of self.
But like you could, like if you were going to a World Athletics, championships as a the oldies one, the masters.
He's ready for the oldies one, is he?
Yeah, he's masters athlete.
The world.
But if you were going for that, and you
masters on this year. That's down in November, down
Gold
the coast.
Coast Masters. Oh, the Pan Pacifics you're talking about. Yeah.
But if you were trying to go overseas and do that, like through the ASF, you could raise money for it, and people could help fund you tax deductible.
Do you think with the 2032 games coming now, it's easier to convince people to donate into sport versus donating into hospitals and those sort of other charities?
I think, they're very different spaces. So you get, in terms of the donor profiles we're seeing, it's people who are passionate about sport and people who see community sport in particular as a key lever for their communities and connectedness, thriving communities. And that's sort of their motivation. But then there's increasingly people who are the philanthropic funds and all the rest who are actually increasingly seeing in our statistics sport being a really impactful platform for national health, for gender equality, for diplomacy and all these things. So I think that's a really interesting trend that I hope we can capitalise on, and we're certainly increasing our efforts around showcasing that opportunity around the home games. So I think sport has never been more visible in our lifetimes, and so now's the time to actually get that message out.
Australian sport is still relies so much on self-funding, family support and volunteering. Yeah. Do you think we are being honest about the unpaid labor and the personal sacrifice most of these athletes have to make?
It's a really great question, and I think there's still we know about it because we're friends with some of these athletes, and you hear about it. And if you work in sport, you certainly know about it. But I think we need to get that story out more and I think through their campaigns, they certainly try to do that, and we augment that through our storytelling. But I think it's through the storytelling where people, they don't realise what these athletes are going through. One of my good mates, Rachel Watson, you would know her. She's a 4 times Paralympic swimmer, medal winner. She's delightful. She lives at Manly, where I live down at the Bayside. She just got a Churchill scholarship. She's in Italy at the moment studying high performance swimming for para swimming. But the story she has, she's in a chair. She to just pay to go to world champs, to the Paralympics, it's quite extraordinary. The cost, because she needs a carer to come on those flights, her own physio and all the rest. Just extraordinary stories that you don't even think of till you sit down and talk to some of these guys, what they go through. But if her story gets out and others, I think people will be really willing to depart with a little bit of cash to just make these things happen. And I think when you have aspirational performers like that at the Paralympics, Olympics, and professional sports too, they just do so much for the aspirational commitment to sport and exercise for young people. We know that from research, actually. Keeping people in education too, that's actually highly correlated with undertaking sport. So there's a lot of stories that come out of that. It's worth investing in.
Amazing.
I think and on the hospital thing, I think sport potentially keeps the hospital cost down if we get everyone playing it. Yeah. So I think it's a proactive solution.
Especially in masters sports, at a certain age, I think if you could invest in one single thing that reduces that dependence on public health, what an amazing opportunity. And we don't see that enough, right? And that's one of the biggest things.
And we've got this epidemic of childhood obesity coming our way, and it is going to be a tremendous strain, as well as the ageing population, on the whole system. So if we don't get people active in any way, it doesn't even have to be organised sport, but it could be a park run, it could be just a walk with friends, it could be a bike ride, a hike, whatever it is, but just getting them out there is so important.
I'm just going to bring it back to you, Sarah. With all the responsibilities and everything that you've got going on, were just appointed as the chair of the Australian Sports Foundation, right? What made you say yes?
I actually, it resonated when we talked about the values earlier, whether you can make an impact, whether it is time well spent and that you'd enjoy it. It ticked all of those boxes. It's a great board.
Yeah.
I've got a fantastic new CEO as well, but it's mainly just the mission. I mean, who doesn't want to build community sport in this nation and make it accessible for all? That's what that's about. I care deeply about that. The power of sport. I know it's a hackneyed term, but it's something that you see in action every day when you work in this sector. And so I think if we can get that story out there to raise more money for that, it's such a high impact, low cost investment when you look at it, to what we were just talking about earlier.
Where do you see it in 5 years? Where would you like to see it in 5 years?
The ASF?
Yep.
Still the most trusted, highest fundraising platform for Australian sport. And, we don't do the fundraising. That's our partners. So that's all our big and small partners, right down to an individual athlete in a local community club, right through the big foundations. The AOC are absolutely on board, as are the ASC as well. So I just think it's a great ecosystem, and we're all working together to make that happen.
I really want to touch on the Minerva Network, but female sport and how
women in sports,
how important that is within society, but also within the actual sports themselves. There's always this talk about the women's league costs us a lot of money and costs it, but what don't, I suppose, society, or what does commercial business not understand how big an impact female sport and getting behind female sport has an impact commercially on the like society?
Yeah, it's a big question, Will. We need another podcast.
Yeah.
But look,
we like asking the big questions.
I'm just so excited about how far women's sport has come, in terms of the visibility, in terms of the investment. So that's a tremendous, and the crowds, it's a really tremendous move in the right direction. But we do have a long way to go. I would say structurally, policy-wise, equality-wise, visibility-wise, and I think most of all to just a deeper understanding of the commerciality of it. And if we want to wear just the commercial hat here, not just the social impact and visibility kind of very real attraction of women's sport, but over here, the commercial hat, I actually think it is definitely an underleveraged asset. And we're hearing that in some of the reports that are being released by some of the big hedge funds, Goldman Sachs recently, JP Morgan, have all allocated an asset class towards not just sport, but women's professional sports. I think that's a nod in the right direction, because they're seeing it as on a trajectory of growth. When you look at some nations where maybe traditionally, culturally, women didn't play sport or follow sport, they're starting to open that up. I think that's a fantastic thing. So it signifies growth in numbers, in participation and fandom. It's also something that really annoys me when you're assessing as a sponsor or someone who can fund sport. You sort of look at all the above line metrics around sponsorship, how many, clicks did we get, how much, how often was our brand mentioned and what was the valence. But in fact, women's sport, because they've had to be quite entrepreneurial, I suppose, in how they engage. The girls actually, there's quite a lot of data suggesting they engage more often and more deeply with their fans. And you've only got to look at some of their social media walls. I've actually started a project on this with some of the guys at MIT looking at this. They seem to be engaging a lot more meaningfully, and I think those metrics need to be captured by sponsors. And when they properly capture them, that commerciality of the women's sport will be more cogent.
I've heard exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Have you?
You bring up the engagement perspective. So when you look at it in the male sport, like you said, there's X amount. Then what you pay for that sponsorship.
Yeah.
But then what you can actually get at less than a third of that price. It might only have
good value.
Yeah, 100% good value based off that engagement. Because there's been a couple of, I guess, female sports recently that's create a lot of media attention. And do you think it is just a little movement, or do you think we've actually gone past that and it's real structural shift now into women's sport escalating?
I think it's beyond a little movement. I think it's a big movement. I think it's a cultural movement. We go back to, I think, one of the biggest moments in this nation was, of course, the Matildas in the quarterfinal. It was just I was there. It was just that was amazing.
How much did that grab across the country? Like,
it was huge. It stopped the nation more than the Melbourne Cup, more than anything else.
Exactly.
It stopped the nation.
Got goosebumps.
Men, women, children. It was fabulous, and it filled stadiums. All those things. It got the ratings. The sponsors were all happy. So it shows a proof of concept, and it showed a cultural movement beyond, just a small movement in sport, however you want to look at it. I think the question, though, we need to ask honestly as a nation there is, what have we done with it? Have we realised the kind of legacy that certainly had an enormous promise at that moment?
To capitalise on it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I actually think we need to really re-examine that, particularly in tough economic times, uncertainty, big decisions and trade-offs being made in sport. I really think we need to be thinking about what is the legacy for gender that we got off that particular mega event, and what will we get off the back of our home games around that as well.
Do you think we're being fair on the female athletes? Our expectations of a female athlete is, they still have to maintain their normal livelihood until we get to that commercial point of you being independent. Plus, you're expecting them to be really good role models, activists, and then commercial entities on top of that. Is that too much of a burden to have? Like, you look at some of the high-profile male athletes, do they have that same expectations? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. There's still a lot of inequality in terms of the pay and but the pay has come a long way, and we have to be conscious of that. A lot of the sports are investing a lot in the women's sports, but on their metrics, perhaps some of it isn't paying off for them. But this is where we need to tell these stories and adjust the algorithms. That would be the other point in ensuring the commerciality does add up, that there's more content. We need a content dump of women's sport across the entire internet to make sure that the search engines show up women's sport when you search. So that's
what do you think the girls out there, what do they need to hear, see or experience to get involved and stay in sport longer?
Well, I think they are staying in sport. I think there's a lot of really exciting pathways they're building for women in sport, from athlete through to coaching now, leadership. I think that's a good move. And as I said, some of the areas around pay and childcare in particular, superannuation, are gradually being addressed. Not entirely though, and it's not equal yet.
I think we could share the love a bit more. I think the females, I think they're. I
think that's what I was asking about.
Coming back to the male, AFL is probably a good example where the males get paid way more than the females, because theoretically their product is more commercially watched and there's more revenue from it. But I sort of go, well, I still think we could share that love a bit more. Like, I think the males could, and there'd be probably a few people arguing with me here, but I think they could give up, for their organisation, they could give up a bit of love to give the females a bit more. And as a whole, the organisation moves forward and sport moves forward. Like, I think we're all part of sport.
How are you finding that with Women's AFL? You've been a huge proponent of that with making that sort of a success, and what a success it's been.
There's been different approaches by different clubs across the league, I would say. One of the things I'm proud of at the Lions is we were able to build a completely gender equal physical high performance training facility out at Brighton Homes Arena. Yeah. It's fabulous. The day the girls walked in there for the first time, they cried. Because they couldn't believe it, because all of their careers out in community footy land they were sharing training facilities and change rooms, toilets, all that kind of stuff with the guys, and they were lucky to get access to it when they needed it. They were used to that, and then suddenly they've got this completely gender equal environment. So I think that has actually been surprising for us because it's translated to a cultural change in the club, filtering right over to the guys as well, where they're going, there's a respect, there's these girls, and there absolutely is a mutual respect between them, because the girls love having the guys around because they look at them and say, oh wow, these are names.
I was down at the Suns last week, doing some work with them, and like there's girls and boys all around. Like it's not
really
like you don't sort of see it's just the males and then there's a couple of females. Yeah. It's just it's covered in both.
We're going to run out of time soon, but we can't let you go without talking about the Olympics. But before we get there, I want to ask one question about women's sports again. What is the next major battle in women's sports that we are not paying enough attention to?
I think, there's quite a few, actually. One is, I think, women's visibility in the broadcast and leadership space. There's been a recent report undertaken nationally here where we're seeing a declining rate of women representation in governance in sport in this nation. And you can mash up all the stats as much as you want, but at the end of the day, women on boards of the professional sports, the higher profile sports, the better funded sports, there's not as many as you might get in maybe the lesser funded sports, volunteer sort of boards and things. So that's one thing, I think. And in terms of media visibility, I don't think there's enough female sports journalists who are visible during big broadcasts. I think that's big. There's not enough of that. We need more of that. And the third one is fixing the algorithms. That's the bit I think a lot of people aren't realising, that traditionally high performance research has focused on male samples. We need a whole lot of research to flood the various points where you look at the data on high performance on the internet and all the rest, and science repositories, and then also reporting, just the content. We need to flood the internet literally with content about women's sport to make sure they rank highly in the searches, because that translates to commercial outcomes.
Wow. Olympics.
It is. The Olympics.
Yeah. Not that long to go now, right? Will, you're involved in the Olympics as well coming up? What do you think? Where do you think we are right now? You think we're ready?
Well, I've got a question for Sarah. We'd throw around legacy a lot, like it's a bit of a buzzword. But for you, what does legacy mean? But on the end of the Olympics, how do you see what do you really want out of this Olympics to get Brisbane? That next step.
I just think it's so exciting. I'm on board. It's for this ride. I think it's just so great for our region and our country, Oceania in general. I think it's like a legacy. Yeah, traditionally people sort of thought of it as a kind of full stop in the research as well, actually, on legacy. But it's actually just a long, long tail end, you hope, where, way after the event, there's a lot of net positive benefits that accrue both economically and socially. I think obviously economically it has to be a success. I think there's just so much scrutiny around the cost of these things, even under the new norms. Taxpayers now, given the economic times that obviously were not predicted at the time we won the bid, obviously that will only enhance scrutiny, I imagine, around this kind of an event. But that being said, I think it's absolutely able to be delivered on time and fantastically in terms of experience and all the rest, with the right economics behind it. So I think that's the first bit. Second bit is we do have to perform well on the podium. So the athletes and their performance matters. We need to be investing in that. One of the reasons is it brings great joy to the nation to see that. But it also translates to a longer term legacy, which is around trust in sport. It's also around pride. And we talk about pride in legacy, around the regional pride and all the rest, citizen pride. But it's a really real thing, and it can absolutely endure. We know that from some of the studies on legacy of other host regions. So I think that's something we do need. And some of the social impacts, I think, out of this, it's a phenomenal real opportunity when we talk about gender equality in sport. I would love to see that dial move straight into that, as a huge outcome long term for this nation around gender equality for sport. And of course, it's the Olympics and Paralympics. So ensuring that having the visibility of the Paralympics here in town means we really get ready for that in terms of the legacy for people with mobility issues, people with disability who are visiting our region, who live and work in our region, making sure we're the most accessible region in the world. I would love that. And that's probably, one of the things that came out of the Paris Olympics. It probably wasn't as accessible as it could have been. That would be a great thing for our town to actually have going forward long term.
How important is 2028? Before we get to 2032?
Hugely important. It's the handover. I've already, I have ideas around the handover, but anyway.
Go for it.
We need maybe Bluey and Mickey involved anyway. But look, I think it is important. I think, there's a lot of learnings. I think that's really interesting in these mega events, host region to host region, and even non-host regions in country learn a lot from each other on how they can capitalise and leverage. So we'll learn a lot out of LA, and particularly, Tokyo, we learnt a lot out of pandemics and how to handle no crowds at the Olympics. Who would have thought? But Japan handled that so well, and so we are prepared now for that kind of a scenario. But out of LA, I think, and even the FIFA World Cup this year in that region, we're going to learn a lot about security. Security is probably the one that's under talked about for the 32 games, but from what our defence forces are modelling, governments are modelling, is we will be needing to embrace that sort of level of security. So I think that will be a big learning. And not only that, I think diplomacy, the IOC, IPC are very good at that. Yeah. So I think we'll learn a lot out of what occurs there around LA 28 and how to probably do it well, we hope, where most nations will be competing, and it's a time of peace that is really visible for the world. When this is going
to be a loaded question.
Oh, okay.
Are most nations going to be competing?
In LA 28? Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. And I'm not involved in those sorts of discussions. So but absolutely. Yeah.
How do you think it's going to go with everything that's happening in the political space? Do you think politics should have any place in sports?
I think anyone who says it doesn't, they're kidding themselves.
Well, you only have to look at the Paralympics, right? Look, all the American athletes having their opinions, I found that really interesting, actually, how much the American athletes were willing to just say, this is what we think, this is what we think, and whether you believe or don't agree with it, I think. And I think, as you said, it's an opportunity for 2 weeks where it doesn't really matter what else is happening in the world. No, it's all, it's peace and love, and we're all doing this for the right reasons. We love sport.
During that time,
we get around everyone. It doesn't really matter what else is happening. So I think even if the US is hosting it, it'll be this, as Sarah said, it'll be the thing.
It's about the sport.
Leading up to the event.
Yeah.
Possibly post-event, there'll be a lot of, discussions and meetings to ensure that peace is realised during that time. There's a lot that goes into these kind of mega events. Even the safety and security of certain teams travelling, which we will see for this year, as well as I think Iran's playing in the World Cup and everything. It's quite.
There's been a lot of controversy around that too, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting. But I think the politics they're relevant.
Yeah.
But I don't underestimate the power of sport in that respect, and sports diplomacy.
It's a positive impact.
It's a really positive impact in building international relations through that.
Breaks through. So let's say we had a very successful 2032. We get past that. Who do you think is going to be better off in 2033 in Brisbane and in Australia?
Well, I think it's not a success, and the legacy has not been delivered if the residents are not feeling better off. So if they're not sort of seeing economic investment, headquarters being based here, increased trade, enhanced brand for tourism and trust internationally, I think residents would be much better off, not only here but the whole of brand Australia. brand Brisbane and Queensland very much on the world map. We would see Oceania. I think it's an Oceania Olympics. So I think hopefully the Pacific very much involved and economically benefiting. So I think the locals, and I hope sport. And going back to what we talked about earlier, community sport, investment in sport, athlete pathways, that anyone who wants to have a crack at sport, whether it's just, amateur or like me or professional and elite, can do that in this nation. That would be a tremendous legacy.
I love your energy that you've got behind all of this. What do you find the public perception is right now? And is there anything that you can do or we can do to be able to try and build extra trust to get people to really buy into these Olympics?
It's a hard one, I think, because it's often a long game by definition, right? We've got, 6 years now, and it's people just see what's in front of them each day right now.
Yep.
And we have to respect that. But I do think you've got to sort of have trust in the process, and our national ability in delivering mega events, whether they're cultural or sporting, is amazing. We are known on the world stage for it, and not just the delivery. It's actually all the planning, security, disaster responsiveness, all these things that surround some of the risk around those events. As a nation, it's culturally embedded. I have faith in that actually we do love our sport. We love the joys that it brings. And I think it's all in a lot of the narrative and the articulation from those leading it. And I think they're doing a good job, actually. So I do think if we articulate some of those benefits in the more dispersed areas, in regional areas, for example, around the supply chain and the capacity they'll have to realise real economic benefit, that will bring everyone along. I'm quite an optimist on that front.
I think we're going to have to wind down pretty soon, but I want to ask one thing. You're clearly someone who says yes to meaningful things. Have you mastered the art of saying no yet?
Oh, probably not. But I'm not a big fan of saying no, to be honest. I sort of think my default.
There's got to be a limit of how many boards you can sit, right?
Yeah. No, there's time is the big time and attention. There's always limited capacity, and you've got to, if you sign up for something, you've got to be 100%, no question about it. So, or you're letting down people who've asked you, So I think that's really important to keep in mind. But I'm a bit of a default yes, unless there's a reason that I just can't due to time and capacity, because I've found it's led to a lot of great adventures. Seriously, where you just went, it's probably not a good time. It's never a good time. And it's probably a bit risky, or I probably won't, succeed in delivering what I'm trying to do. But what the hell? Just get in there and have fun.
Do you have like a little bit of a decision-making framework? I know that as I've gotten older, just around some of the values in particular, if it's just something that I'm really aligned with, not necessarily as a monetary side, but is there anything that you do that you just ask yourself a couple of questions before you make that yes?
Yeah, it probably is a little bit about, like what I said earlier, would it be fun? Are they good people? Like, there's a no decades rule I have. Can I say that?
Yep. Absolutely can.
And can I add value? Like, is it aligned? I suppose that's similar to your framework, Magnus. Yeah. Can I add value?
Yep. All righty. Is it quick fire question time, Don?
Yeah, I think we could keep going forever, right? This is one of those episodes where we can just talk forever.
It's been fun.
Yeah, we would love to get you up. There's this research paper that you did on esports, so we would love to get you into a whole episode to talk about that. But I think
that would be fun as well. It's so interesting that.
Yeah, and there's some amazing findings in there. But I think I'm going to hand over to you, mate. Like, I think we need to wrap this up. Otherwise, this will be like a 3-hour podcast.
Are you ready?
I am, Magnus.
What's the one thing that you have mastered that's got nothing to do with sport or education?
Probably, sniffing out a good meal around town. I love food, good food.
What's the one thing you're still trying to master?
Oh, there's so many things. So acoustic guitar, ukulele, Spanish, and there's probably,
We need to get an acoustic guitar. we need to get someone
Golf.
to teach us. Yep.
But that's not sport. Is that sport?
Yeah, that's sport.
What's the worst advice that you've ever received?
Oh, don't rock the boat.
What book, conversation, teacher, or experience has changed how you see the world?
Oh, there's been many along the way. I've been really lucky to have a lot of mentors and sponsors and people I've come across who've just taught me so much. I've had two places that have taught me a lot. And one of those is the Kenyan slums, and one of them is the Indian slums, where I've spent some time. I won't go into the details, but it was a humanitarian immersion thing. I learned a lot about poverty, and now when I people talk about poverty, I've seen it, and to meet and talk to people in those areas and what they do, how entrepreneurial they are, how energized they are, how optimistic they are. It's extraordinary. So I sort of think, I learned that really changed my perspective on what I thought was poverty.
Just quickly, I was in Nepal up in that region a couple of years ago, and that was my first time in those sort of third world countries. And that really lit me up, where you got these kids in the middle of absolutely nowhere and just how happy and content they are. Yeah. And they have literally nothing. They're kicking rocks around and we don't.
The opportunity, I grew up in a third world country and, I travel a fair bit. The opportunity cost of not investing in those, as you said, we treat them as poverty and below a certain line. And I totally agree with you.
It's huge, on that altruistic dollars where they should be spent. It should be spent in some of those areas because, it's quite extraordinary. The when you see it,
What's a belief you once held strongly that you've now changed your mind about?
Oh, I change my mind all the time. Am I allowed to do that?
I think it's called science.
Exactly. So it's well, one is longevity. I've been reading up a lot of the science of longevity, and that's fascinating. And Magnus, you would know heaps about this, but it's changed my perspective around a number of things, So,
Just finished a book on that. We'll talk about that after.
Okay.
Who's one person, living or dead, that you'd love to have dinner with?
Oh, can I choose two?
Yes.
Mum and Dad. Yeah, I miss them every day. It's really funny, even when it's been a while and you just miss them. You want to tell them stuff, give them an update, and they're just not there. It's horrible.
Final question. Complete this sentence. Mastery is?
Never ending.
Very great answer.
That's a good answer.
It's been absolutely awesome. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you.
Oh, well, likewise, getting to know you guys some more and just really enjoyed the conversation. What's there not to enjoy around sport, education,
sports, education,
stories? It's fun.
Governance.
Cheers.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for the invitation.
Hope you enjoyed this exciting episode of the Mastering Podcast. If you got value from today's conversation, hit that subscribe button now and share this episode with a friend. Until next time.